Hello and welcome to the third episode of Vidhi's Legal Capsule, when we try and understand India's law on drugs in light of the recent developments in Mumbai. I am Naveed Mehmood, a research fellow with the criminal justice team at Vidhi, and joining me is Neha Singhal, a senior resident fellow at Vidhi, leading the work on criminal justice. A few days back, the Narcotics Control Bureau arrested some people from a party in Mumbai and seized some cannabis, some cocaine, and some MDMA pills. The manner in which this case is unfolded is and reported in the media raises some questions about how the Indian law on drugs treats drug users as well as how it considers trafficking as a threat. Neha, what do you think about the role of NCB in consumption cases? Do you think it's correct to go after consumers in order to catch the big fish, or is there a better way to do it?
So I think there are two parts to this question. One is NCB's role in consumption, and second, any law enforcement's role in going after after consumers. NCB's role traditionally has been to coordinate activities between state governments, to be the nodal agency between various state police, to look at international trafficking, to coordinate our international obligations, to represent India internationally. So it's usually been the role of NCB has been at an international stage. It has been for commercial quantities of drugs to prevent illicit trafficking. It has never historically gone after consumption. That is not the NCB's job at all. That is the state police jurisdiction. So this is something, this trend is a new thing that we are seeing. We haven't seen this with the NCB before. So keeping that aside, but just going after consumers to get after the big fish is a foolhardy thing to do, because largely consumers at the most are going to be in touch with their peddlers, and peddlers themselves are very low down in the chain of low down in the drug chain. So consumers are not likely to get you to the main traffickers in any case. And even per law, consumption is seen sympathetically. It's seen as an illness, as a problem. It's even the objects and reasons of the law said that consumption should be seen as, or the approach towards consumption should be reformative and not deterrent. So the law that we are following itself tells you that consumption is something that we should be seeing sympathetically. So law enforcement should definitely not be going after consumers to get after the big fish at all.
This is very interesting because from our research from Mumbai last year, we see that the law seems to be applied at the whims and fancies of the police. And yes, we see that consumption cases went up drastically in 2014-15 and 5 times, that is. And arrests were made of marginalized communities. People from the footpaths were arrested. People from slums would get arrested. On the same day, they would be produced before the court, they'll plead guilty, and they'll get, and the case will get disposed of. And do you think the law on consumption, the way in which the law defines consumption, section 27, that is it vague? Does it leave too much for the police to do? Or is it?
So our section 27 basically says anybody who consumes a narcotic drug or psychotropic substance can be punished from 6 months to a year, depending on the drug. And that's all it says. And in our research, we had posed the hypothetical question that what does this mean? Because then, is it supposed to be during the act of consumption, which is how the police interpret section 27 in Punjab, where they actually, no, they interpret it as residue. So in Punjab, they'll pick up the matchbox or the silver, the foil in which they're inhaling heroin. In Bombay, we saw that the police were picking up people in the act of consumption of marijuana. But the law leaves much to be desired, because when it says whoever consumes, it doesn't say whether it's in the act of consumption, whether it says right after consumption. And as we saw in the whole Bollywood scandal last year, that even WhatsApp chats which said that they had at some point may have consumed marijuana was enough to be seen as evidence. This was a hypothetical situation that we had posed, but we hadn't seen this ever playing out. We are seeing this playing out today, that the vagueness of the law is being used against consumers, or maybe people who are not even consumers.
What's very interesting is how the quantities also play out in such cases. Last year, we saw a few grams of cannabis led to arrest of a few individuals from Bollywood.
Grams.
And this year also, we are seeing some 21 grams of cannabis leading to arrests.
Yes.
The quantities seem to be very relevant in terms of the NDPS Act granting you punishment and the quantum of punishment. So your research from Punjab does tell a lot about how quantities affect sentencing in intermediate and commercial quantities cases.
So quantity within marijuana is a small quantity is up to a kilo of marijuana is considered to be a small quantity. As per the law, if you're caught with small quantity of any drugs, you're considered to be a consumer and not a trafficker. In Punjab, our research was focused on special courts in Punjab, so we only came across intermediate and commercial quantities of drugs. Intermediate quantity is between a small quantity and commercial quantity. So actually, I don't know what the intermediate quantity for marijuana is. Maybe you do. Some 250, I think from 1 kilo to 25 kilos, I'm not sure. But what I saw in Punjab was that most cases were coming for intermediate quantity, but the judges there gave the accused the benefit of doubt that these people are likely to be users, and therefore gave them very small punishments, but they were required to give them punishment because now they are before the court and they have been caught with drugs. So largely for narcotic drugs, whether it was marijuana, whether it was opium, bhukki, poppy husk, the punishment was up to about a month, and the cases were also disposed of fairly quickly because Punjab, of course, suffers from drug addiction. So quantities are relevant. Quantity is actually the only criteria under which NDPS Act does prescribe punishments.
That's an interesting approach that Punjab has also taken. We don't see the numbers don't tell us that a lot of consumers get arrested. And as you said, the courts also consider this fact that consumers may be addicts and they perhaps need more protection than to be sent to the criminal to courts and to jail.
Bombay, our research says that 90% whatever of the rests of a consumption, which is what we see even in 2020. The numbers of cases have dramatically dropped. There are about 4,000 cases registered in Maharashtra in 2020, and about 3,500 in Bombay. But even within that, some 93% of those cases are all of consumption cases. So Maharashtra seems to be really going after consumers only to, I don't know, to maybe to just to keep their arrests up, but they're not going after the big fish or the traffickers at all.
And that's the distinction between this big fish and the consumers is there under the NDPS Act. Absolutely. But perhaps because we talk about the consumer, we talk about an addict, and we talk about a trafficker all in the same breath. This perhaps leads to the problem of the NCB getting involved with the consumer, and the addicts don't find enough space to be sent for rehab.
I do think that there is, I don't know, this is a mala fide intervention, because even within the government, even within government papers, there's a small quantity committee that we have referred to in our Punjab report from 1995, which has recommended decriminalization of Section 27, where within government, within the Ministry of Health, Family Welfare, they themselves have said that criminalization of consumption should be, drug consumption should be decriminalized because it's helping nobody. So it's not, and the NCB, I am fairly certain, is aware of this. So it is not like the NCB doesn't know that consumption is something that is best left alone, because it's just a waste of their resources.
Just to conclude this conversation, Sikkim seems to have enacted a law that tries to treat consumers in a different manner and tries to afford them more protection. And do you think that decriminalization will help? And how do you see that decriminalization should operate in terms of the NDPS Act getting amended or a new law coming into the picture?
Well, I think, again, I think you're best placed to answer this question, because Sikkim is something that you have looked at more deeply than I have. So I will hand this over to you quickly, but I do think decriminalizing will help. One is just, this witch hunt. I think laws, this is not specific to NDPS, any law which allows for witch hunting to happen, then we are basically left to the mercy of the authorities, right? Left at the mercy of the authorities. It's just a matter of time when the situation, for whatever reason, maybe they're hard pressed to make arrests, maybe there is some political angle involved, I don't know, but it's just a matter of time when these provisions, which are vague, which can lead to witch hunt, will lead to witch hunt. So we need to have better laws, we need to have tighter laws which don't have inbuilt exploitation in them. So that's just anything. Consumption should be decriminalized for several reasons. One is that it just doesn't make any sense. The other is that it's so badly written that at some point or the other, maybe it's an Aryan Khan, maybe it is a poor rickshaw puller, it doesn't matter who. somebody will be victimized by this provision. And we shouldn't, as a polity, allow this. But why don't you tell us about Sikkim?
So Sikkim basically looks at drug consumers in a different manner, and they try and keep them away from the criminal courts and afford them an opportunity to go for rehab. And they have done it through their law. So as you said, I think somewhere we need to maybe fix how our laws are drafted. A section 21 could be, 27 could be better written. The bail provisions could be better written, maybe to ensure that addicts or consumers do not end up in jails. And if there's a possibility, maybe a different law that looks at consumption and addiction from in a different manner than how you want to look at trafficking and peddling, because trafficking and peddling can be a police issue, it can be a policing issue, but consumption and addiction is certainly not a policing issue. So
Yes.
thanks a lot, Neha. Thanks for joining
Thank you,
us.
Naveed. Thank you for having me.